Excellent. You can start your journey of investment with Altex East Africa. That's it, my friend. Let's dive right into the business. It's a Monday, and of course, welcome back for another week of trading here on different stock exchanges. We are, of course, getting to give you up to speed with what is happening currently in the markets as they open up after a long weekend. In Uganda, the markets were closed since Friday. Of course, Martyrs Day was on Saturday, so it did not affect anyhow the trading on the exchange on Friday. But let's see across Africa and have a look at the different stock exchanges. Let's start with Ghana. Now, Ghana has, remember, 38 listings on their exchange. And yesterday, on Friday, we had a list about 18 of these participate in trade. Now, this is generally an improvement comparing the day's trade with, of course, the day before on Thursday. And the portfolio here of investors really remains strong. If at all, of course, you had a balanced portfolio. When you look at the trading from the Ghana Stock Exchange angle, we saw at least 18 listings come on board to participate in trade. And the day ended with 2 gainers and absolutely no losers at all. Now, Guinness Ghana breweries led the gainers at a 6.67% appreciation in price, followed by Unilever Ghana at least 2.63% appreciation in price. However, on the movement side, MTN Ghana remained the big dog with at least about 17,643 shares traded. Now, like MTN Uganda, MTN Ghana is just a recent listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange, and it's doing quite well in as far as trading volumes are concerned on the Ghana Securities Exchange. Now, generally speaking, we had 58,803 shares traded on the Ghana Stock Exchange, corresponding to a market value of at least 174,000. And that is, of course, comparing with the previous day, a 32% decline in the volume and a 72% decline in the turnover on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Regarding the Consumer Price Index, that is the benchmark index of the Ghana Securities Exchange, we had at least the index benchmark move up at least about 4.2 points to at least close off at 2,515 points. Meaning implying we had a generally better day of trade comparing, of course, with across last week how Ghana Stock Exchange was performing. Elsewhere in Africa, on the African continent, Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the principal stock exchange of South Africa and the biggest and oldest stock exchange within Africa, also appreciated in their all share index. Now, amongst the 421 listings that are on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, we had at least about 319 of these trade in the exchange at Friday trading. Now, at the end of the day, we had 207 gainers and at least about 207 gainers and at least about 89 losers on the market, with Matengu Mining Company coming in at the top of the gainers with 85.19% appreciation in price. Now, what is Matengu Mining Company? This is an environmental service company, and currently its focus is after, of course, the closure of the coal operations. The company is now focused on eliminating all corporate costs and maintaining the company's cash shell in Johannesburg. Now, Matengu currently is listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange with a market value or a market capitalization of at least about 383 South African rand, making it the 313th most valuable company or stock on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Not pretty valuable there, but of course the current performance of the stock is quite it's quite mind-blowing when you look at the figures. At least 85% was added after the company gained 1.15 South African rand and appreciated to 2.50 South African rand. Small price movements with small price stocks are always a big deal. This is where you don't have to skip it because it's just a small price. But look at the percentages, and those percentages really communicate what value, of course, the shareholder is getting back, no matter how much stock they're holding. So it's always important for you to understand the movements in percentages rather than the actual movements in the pricings on the different stock exchanges. Moving on, after Matengu Mining Company, we had the Kibo Energy add about 50% of value to their share price, and the Ranfold Gold and Expo Company at least added at least 23.08% on their closing price, whereas the Stefanuti Stocks Holdings at least had 21.01% added to their value. On the losing side, Bricor International had the least or the biggest loss, that came out at 33.33% depreciation in price. Regarding the performance of the benchmark index of South Africa, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange J203 index at least performed pretty much better, with an appreciation of at least about 1,300 points, closing at 77,126.06 points on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. That's data from Johannesburg Stock Exchange. You can follow for more on our website at www.smart.24tv.com. And you can now go to, of course, we can now move on to the Uganda Stock Exchange within East Africa, and later on we can look at the Nairobi Stock Exchange. But before that, in West Africa, Nigeria Stock Exchange also did quite perform well. When you look at the movements in the all-share index, the all-share index added at least 12.25 points and closed at 55,820 points. Now, Nigeria Stock Exchange has currently about 156 listings on the main board of its exchange. When you look at the aggregate performance, we had 116 Nigerian Stock Exchange listed equities participate in trade on Friday. At the moment, when you look at the biggest movers and gainers, there were 29 gainers and just 28 losers who fell short of their prices on the closure of the Friday tradings, with Stanbic IBTC Holdings leading the gainers at 10% share price appreciation. It was followed strictly by MRS Oil Nigeria at least 9.92%, and of course Corn Oil at 9.73%. These three have maintained momentum on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and we keep watching them and see what value they could have for the shareholders there in Nigeria. And of course, we will get you up to speed with whatever will be happening in these companies. On the losing side, we had the FTN Cocoa Processors coming at the bottom with a total end of day price depreciation of 9.59%, and the UPDC coming at a 9.83% depreciation in price. Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, on the other hand, as well, added over 1,142 points on their benchmark index after the Friday tradings on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. Now, Zimbabwe Stock Exchange has 112,116.14 points on its all-share index currently. The stock is doing quite well, and the all-share index has a flat, almost flat curve, and then of course a sharp rise, at least since the beginning of the month of May. That is when we did have very strong movement in the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange all-share index. Investors have become very interested in the stocks here, especially those concerned with mining and, of course, the financial institution. On Friday, CBZ Holdings led the gainers with a 15% price appreciation, closing off at 1,063 Zimbabwe dollars. And the ZB Financial Holdings appreciated at least over 14.99%. Regarding the performance of the index moved up 1,142 points on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. Moving on, let's come back home, of course, to Uganda Securities Exchange and have a look at the movements here on our local stocks as we, of course, continue to monitor the stocks and earnings coming in from the different companies on the Uganda Securities Exchange. Now, generally speaking, on the exchange on Friday, at least in aggregate, 5 listings participated in trade on the Uganda Securities Exchange, ending disappointingly with over 8 losers on the market and with no single gainer. By now, you can already tell what happened to our all-share index. Of course, it was obliterated with the points dropping off at least 2.94, closing off at about 1,047 points on the exchange. Now, on the loser side, we had several stocks, and Bank of Baroda Uganda unfortunately came in at the bottom. Bank of Baroda Uganda has been in the news since last week, and of course this is due to what is going to be happening today. If you've been following the show, you are aware that Bank of Baroda Uganda is going to be issuing more stocks today. It's the Monday, the 5th of June, and on this date is the day when the Capital Markets Authority, of course, approved the issuance of extra 1.25 billion shares on the exchange. Now, in a notice through the Uganda Securities Exchange last week, Bank of Baroda indicated that the regulator of capital markets in Uganda, the Capital Markets Authority, had approved its application to list additional shares, a move that has also been approved by the Uganda Securities Exchange. Now, the listing is expected to mobilize at least 125 billion Ugandan shillings, which will show up the bank's capital position ahead of the 2024 Bank of Uganda deadline. Now, the bonus issue is an offer, of course, to get additional shares to the existing shareholders. So this offer is only applicable to those who already have shares at Bank of Baroda Uganda. Now, there's the possibility that not all these shares will be bought, which is not what we want. But according to Friday performance, there looks to be a little bit of disinterest. And I don't think this is going to affect the bonus issuance because these shares are going to be sold at quite an affordable price. In March, shareholders approved Bank of Baroda's bonus offer during their revelation of the financial statements for the year 2022. And this indicated that it would be key to mobilize funds to boost its minimum capital requirements. The move just came months after the Minister of Finance, Mr. Honorable Matia Kasaija, increased the capital requirements for commercial banks from at least about 25 billion to 125 billion Ugandan shillings. And of course, the increase of Bank of Uganda indicated earlier sought to align with the East African Community members' minimum capital requirements when it comes to their commercial banks in Kenya, in Tanzania. None of them was relating to Uganda at 25 billion Ugandan shillings. The new regulation also increased the capital requirements for the financial microfinance institutions from 1 billion Ugandan shillings to at least 25 billion. The new requirements seem to be having an impact, of course, on the market, with some financial institutions in Uganda actually closing due to these capital requirements. This, of course, included Afriland Bank, which closed last year, as well as Top Finance Bank, which was acquired by the Djibouti-based Salam Africa Bank, as well as Orient Bank, which is now possessed by I&M Holdings. This, of course, now comes to the shareholders. Today, on Monday, the 5th of June, is the day you're having your bonus shares. You can go to the Uganda Securities Exchange at Nakawa Business Park and be able to know how you're going to be able to purchase these, or you could go through your stockbroker. The shares are going to be sold at 10 Ugandan shillings per share. current price openings, I don't know where the price will be by the end of today, but as we open the market today, Bank of Baroda Uganda stock was at 64.38 Ugandan shillings. So you can imagine someone offering you at 10 Ugandan shillings. That's almost at least about, let's see, how much discount is that? Because 10 shillings, comparing that to 64 shillings, it's a quite amazing deal, I would think. And Bank of Baroda has been one of those companies that has also been able to issue dividends in the past few years. So you can be rest assured that you're going to get some bit of value coming in from these extra shares. If this bonus issue is successful, the Bank of Baroda Uganda will be able to get into the minimum capital requirements as per the Bank of Baroda, rather the Bank of Uganda directive that will be in operation in 2024. So the bank will be able to remain a commercial bank in Uganda. That is, of course, our hope and our prayer that this bonus issue goes well. Now, yesterday, Bank of Baroda Uganda traded at least about, let's see, 24,000 shares. And unfortunately, the day ended with a 14.16% depreciation in price, and the stock fell from at least about 75 to 64.38 Ugandan shillings on the market. Other losers on the market included the Equity Bank Limited stock at 0.22% depreciation in price, Kenya Airways at 0.22% as well as several other listings from Nairobi, like East African Breweries Limited, the Jubilee Holdings Limited stock, and KCB. In as far as the market participants are concerned, the NIC, or the National Insurance Corporation, had the biggest volume at 2.927 million shares. Yes, it's that time of the year when NIC has the biggest movements. You know, NIC has quite some very, very interesting performances. You have the stock quite dormant for a very long time, but towards the annual general meeting or after the annual general meeting, there's always a lot of interest from the shareholders and, of course, from the public to buy into the company. National Insurance Corporation last year around this time was able to issue a right issue. Actually, these were bonus shares. It wasn't a right issue. These were bonus shares given to shareholders. Now, what Bank of Baroda Uganda is doing could be the right issue, because at the right issue, yes, the shares go to the shareholders, but this comes at a cost. Now, when it comes to a bonus issue, the shares come at absolutely no cost. And this is a way of rewarding the shareholders based on the company's performance. But maybe the company wasn't able to issue dividends, and then they want to still give back to their shareholders. So they could say, okay, let's get more shares free. It's like the company is buying more shares for their shareholders. So that's exactly what National Insurance Corporation did last year. Instead of issuing a dividend, they issued bonus shares for every shareholder. So it goes like this. So if you have one share, they can say, let's give you 2 extra shares for every share you have, right? So that's how the bonus shares or the bonus issue actually goes about. Moving on, the MTN Uganda company also traded 150,700 shares on Friday, closing the market with 165 Ugandan shillings per share. Bank of Baroda, as I mentioned, of course, traded 24,000 shares, closing up at 64 shillings. MTN, rather Umeme Limited, also traded 14,900 shares and closed at 440.0 Ugandan shillings. The Stanbic Bank Uganda stock traded just 59 shares and closed the day at least 25.94 Ugandan shillings. In summary, the Uganda Securities Exchange All Share Index, which tracks all the 18 listings on the Uganda Securities Exchange, at least shed off 2.94 points and closed at 1,046 points. Moving on to Nairobi Securities Exchange. In Nairobi Securities Exchange, the trade was also quite interesting. At the end of the day, out of the 65 listings, 48 participated in trade. And the day ended interestingly with 24 gainers and just 16 losers on the market. The day's gainers were led by Sasini Tea and Coffee, rather British American Tobacco Kenya, at least at an appreciation of 5.41%, and Sasini Tea Coffee came in the second position at least about 5.17% appreciation in price. The Scan Group added 3.47%, whereas the East African Portland Cement added at least 3.45% of value to their share price at the close of the day. On the losing side, Wutumi also led at the bottom with a depreciation at 10%, closing off the day at 0.18 Kenyan shillings. Sanlam Kenya, an insurance company there as well, shared of some bit of value with 9.62% depreciation, whereas the Trans-Century company lost 7.53%. And Safaricom came out at the biggest volume with a trade of at least 10 million shares on the market. This led, of course, to an improvement in the figures. However, the volumes did not improve and remained at a 12% decline, comparing those with Thursday trade, whereas the deals improved by 13%, implying that more investors came on board to actually buy and sell shares on Nairobi Securities Exchange. That's the trading from across Africa. Remember to follow up for more. You can always watch Smart 24 TV. We do have information in our squeeze back there. That information is recent and up to date to give you what is happening on the market right now in real time. We also have the top stories in our daily markets. We have top stories in the business world, within East Africa, within Uganda, and in the globe. Of course, running, of course, in our squeeze back, and you can always get to see what's happening. Now, let's get to look at the different performances from the United States, where, of course, we await another week of unexpected results. We don't know what to expect this week because a lot has been happening. Now, currently, the debt ceiling talk is done, according to data from Bloomberg. The debt ceiling talk is almost done. And when you look at this week, we are now getting to see what is going to be the aftermath of these talks. Now, following a very strong jobs report that was released last week, this is, of course, for the month of May, a signed deal to raise the nation's borrowing limit, and, of course, beginning of the Federal Reserve's quiet period ahead of their June 13th, 14th policy meeting. Investors will get a reprieve of sorts in the week ahead. Investors reading the Fed tea leaves now a new, of course, face to the central bank's rate hikes, which are seemingly going to come down. The central bank has been hiking a lot the benchmark interest rate, that is the central bank rate. But some economists argue that the May jobs report proves that the Federal Reserve hasn't done its job. And when you see the U.S. economy in the last 1 month, in May, created at least about 300,000 jobs last month, since the month of January, making, of course, the investors very hopeful that this will be a good investment time. Now, latest from the markets, it shows that last week, the three indices rose more than 3%, with the Nasdaq pacing gains once again, rising more than 4% in year to date. And the Nasdaq Composite has since then at least added 26.5%, with the S&P 500 up by 11.5% in year to date, whereas the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up by 2% on Friday tradings. The S&P 500 finished last week's trading at the highest level since August 2022. That's it, my friend. Our time is fast spent, unfortunately, but I'm very glad you chose to join us this morning. Remember, the show is proudly brought to you by Alltex East Africa. With Alltex, you can buy bonds and lend to governments in East Africa at the best interest rates with accessibility and, of course, affordability. At just 15,000 shillings starting, you can be able to invest using a dialing code or a USSD code of *292# and following the prompts to register and learn more about products. Alltex East Africa, you can do something new. And that's it, my friend. Thank you once again for tuning in and for watching Smart 24 TV. My name is Anthony, and I'll catch you tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a wonderful day. Stay tuned on Smart 24 TV. We drive your business.